Imagine standing before a wall of stone so large, so impossibly precise, that for a moment you forget the limits of human strength. Dawn breaks over the Bekaa Valley, washing Baalbek in gold, and the megaliths, those titanic blocks weighing hundreds upon hundreds of tons, glow as if awakening from a sleep older than recorded history. Then the light shifts, and the illusion collapses into something far more disturbing. You realize you are staring at a puzzle whose builders are gone, whose tools are unknown, and whose methods defy every equation we rely on to measure the past. Their temples have crumbled, their empires have scattered into dust, and their names have been erased by languages that no longer exist. And yet the stones remain, silent, deliberate, untouched by 5,000 years of storms and conquest. They are so massive that 21st century equipment fails to move them. It's as if the people vanished. But the intent behind their work refused to die. Across the ancient world, we recognize ambition. In Egypt's pyramids, in the stones of Pumapunku, in Malta's subterranean temples, cultures separated by oceans and millennia pushed their architecture to the very edge of what their societies could achieve. But Baalbek is not merely at the edge, it stands beyond it. A place where the limits of ancient engineering are not simply tested, but shattered. We are not fluffing here. In fact, facts are so shocking that scientists are helpless to understand the mystery of the megaliths of Baalbek. One of the stones at Baalbek weighs an estimated 1,650 tons. That is heavier than two fully loaded Boeing 747s that are carved from limestone, shaped with precision, and abandoned in a quarry as if it were a mere afterthought. And yet, just a few hundred meters away, three stones nearly as large, each around 800 tons, were not abandoned. They were moved, aligned, and elevated into a retaining wall with joints so tight that a sheet of paper cannot be slipped between them. Civilizations rise and fall with predictable patterns. They fight, they build, they worship, they disappear. But Baalbek does not behave like a ruin shaped by the natural evolution of human hands. Its megaliths do not match the tools found around them. Its scale exceeds the needs of the Romans who built atop it. Its precision ignores the constraints of Bronze Age technology. And its foundations, those monstrous blocks of 800 tons and more, seem to follow a blueprint we do not recognize, designed by minds we cannot name. This is the part archaeology tends to soften with theories, but it is the part ancient people would have understood instinctively. The ground beneath Baalbek was not neutral. It was sacred, powerful, cosmically aligned, and what was built here mattered. What you're about to hear is not just the story of a temple, or a Roman outpost, or a forgotten city in the mountains of Lebanon. It is the story of something older, deeper, and profoundly unsettling. When you connect the stones, the history, the physics, and the myths, a picture emerges, one that should not exist if Baalbek were merely another ruin of the ancient world. But once seen, it becomes impossible to ignore. For most ruins, history feels like a book you can flip open and read. But Baalbek is not a book. It is a palimpsest, a place where each civilization scratched its story over the one that came before, never quite erasing what was already there. To step onto this ground is to feel time stacked beneath your feet like sediment. Neolithic hearths buried beneath Bronze Age altars, Canaanite shrines built over older, nameless sanctuaries, Roman colonnades rising like a crown above foundations that defy every rule we know. The first thing you notice is not the Roman stonework, impressive as it is. It's the atmosphere, a tension in the air, as though the valley itself has been holding its breath for thousands of years. Ancient writers sensed it too. They described Baalbek as a gateway between worlds, a place where gods descended and men dared to look upward. And as you walk deeper into the complex, you begin to understand why. The Romans came here in the 1st century and erected the largest temple they ever built, the Temple of Jupiter, taller than the Parthenon, richer than anything in Rome itself. It was once the crown jewel of Roman ambition in the east. Its podium alone commands awe, a platform elevated between 7 and 10 meters, constructed from stones so massive that even today they defy the full comprehension of modern engineers. But what they built on top of is the part modern science can't explain. Beneath the classical columns lies a platform so grand, so structurally unnecessary, that it feels less like a foundation and more like a proclamation left by an older world. Our documentary revolves around these mysterious Trilithon. Those 3 stones, each roughly 800 tons, are cut and placed with almost surgical precision. Their dimensions alone are staggering. Roughly 19 to 21 meters long, 4.3 meters high, and 3.6 meters wide. To picture such a mass is almost to imagine a small mountain, carved with mathematical precision, then hoisted into place atop the foundation, with joints so tight that no tool, no modern wedge, could penetrate between them. Beneath these leviathans lie 24 monoliths, each about 300 tons, forming a T-shaped base whose geometry suggests not mere engineering, but an architectural language written in stone. The Temple of Jupiter itself once boasted 54 Corinthian columns, each carved to exacting proportions, projecting Roman grandeur across the valley. Today, only 6 remain. Time, earthquakes, and human intervention, most notably the removal of columns for the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople during the 6th century, have reduced the temple to ruins. Yet the foundations endure, silent and incomprehensible. Modern archaeologists can only marvel at the audacity of what was attempted and the precision with which it was executed. Every attempt collapses under its own weight. Whatever moved them didn't drag them across sand or lift them with cranes. The methods implied here belong to a technological vocabulary we no longer speak. And yet, the Trilithon is not the most shocking part. Just 800 meters south, slightly elevated above the temple complex, lies the quarry. Here, the scale of human ambition becomes almost grotesque. The stone of the pregnant woman, discovered in the 19th century, weighs an estimated 1,000 tons and measures 20.76 meters long, 4 meters wide, and 4.32 meters high. A second monolith, the Stone of the South, tips the scales at approximately 1,200 tons. For years, it was considered the largest single stone ever carved by human hands, until another stone was found beside it. In 2014, German archaeologists unearthed a third behemoth, estimated at 1,650 tons. It was the largest known monolith ever attempted in the ancient world, stretching 21 meters in length, 4.8 meters in width, and 5.5 meters high. Larger than anything we can meaningfully manipulate with modern construction machinery. And these were not crude blocks. Their surfaces are flat, polished, and deliberately shaped. They weren't accidents. They weren't experiments. They were intended. And that is the question that begins to haunt you. Intended for what? Tool marks on these stones bear the unmistakable hallmarks of Roman quarrying. Chisels, picks, and wedge systems clearly applied with methodical care. Yet none of these techniques would explain how such masses could be extracted, moved, and positioned with the precision we see at the temple. Even more perplexing, these colossal blocks remain abandoned in the quarry. Their sheer scale makes their movement an unsolved riddle. Why quarry stones of this magnitude if they were never to be used? What force, what knowledge could have positioned the Trilithon hundreds of meters away with such accuracy while leaving even larger stones behind? When you explore the history of Baalbek, these questions become terrifying and confusing. If you're enjoying this journey so far, consider subscribing. It helps us continue exploring the mysteries that shape our universe. It is here that Baalbek stops being merely a marvel of engineering and begins to speak in the language of humans, their ambition, their belief, their need to touch the eternal. Beneath the polished limestone and Corinthian columns, beneath the Roman temples and their meticulously laid podiums, the valley holds whispers of nearly 10 millennia of human presence, to when early Neolithic groups settled these slopes. Pottery fragments, fragile and burned with age, speak of pre-pottery Neolithic bee settlers, people who lived around 9000 BCE, long before history had found words to record itself. Imagine them, small communities huddled against winter winds, gazing at these same mountains, sensing that this place was different. Why here? Why this plateau in the Bekaa Valley, where the earth feels heavier, the air charged with something unseen? Their tools were simple, their lives were fragile, yet they chose this valley, this plateau, as a place of ritual, a place where they believed the ground itself resonated with some greater force. They left behind traces of hearths, rudimentary tools, and pottery fragments, small markers of a presence that predates monumental architecture. After them, on this mysterious land, the Canaanites built their first temples. They were not of marble or granite, but of mud, clay, and stone, dedicated to deities whose names would echo across millennia. Baal, lord of storms and sky; Astarte, goddess of fertility and war; and their son, whose myth intertwined life, death, and the rhythms of the seasons. These early structures were not simply shelters for worship, they were instruments of observation, carefully aligned to the heavens, positioned to capture the movement of stars, planets, and the sun's shadow. It is as if the Canaanites understood something fundamental, that the rhythms of the cosmos were written into the earth itself, that the temple was a mirror for the sky, and that devotion was inseparable from understanding. Every stone, every altar, every mark etched into clay carried meaning, a language of power older than empires. Legends grow from these foundations. Stories tell of giants who moved massive stones that resemble small mountains with the strength of jinn, spirits of wind and fire shaping the very landscape at the command of human kings or divine beings. Myths that sound fantastic to the modern ear were, to those who lived here, literal explanations for the incomprehensible. How else could one account for the natural and unnatural forces that conspired to make Baalbek so singular, so enduring? Was it the gods, or some lost knowledge that whispered to these people, guiding their hands as they raised the first monuments? These were societies that did not see the universe as indifferent. To them, the land itself was alive, infused with power. Every ritual performed, every sacrifice made, every stone positioned was both devotion and experiment, a dialogue with forces they could not fully name but felt intimately. And while the evidence of these early Canaanite works has mostly eroded, traces remain: pottery shards, ritual objects, alignments that defy coincidence, small fingerprints of a civilization that viewed architecture, religion, and astronomy as one seamless act of comprehension. Yet even in the Bronze Age, Baalbek hints at questions we are still struggling to answer. How could these people conceive of spaces that would one day support structures beyond their technical capacity? Why choose this plateau, this valley, this alignment of earth and sky as the stage for devotion? And why do their legends insist that something extraordinary, something almost otherworldly, participated in the shaping of the land itself? Centuries flowed across the Bekaa Valley like a river, carrying with it new peoples, new tongues, and new powers. By the time the Persian empires reached the Levant, between the 6th and 4th centuries BCE, Baalbek had already gathered the weight of countless generations. It was no longer a mere settlement, it was a place of reverence, a stage upon which humans had long sought to commune with the unseen forces of the world. Archaeologists uncover fragments from this era: ceramics, votive offerings, small inscriptions, tiny remnants of a devotion that persisted across centuries. There are no grand palaces, no monumental structures left from these Persian days, yet the very act of worship here speaks volumes. The site's significance endured because the stones themselves, the earth itself, seemed to demand it. It was a living memory, a place that had absorbed the energy of every prayer, every ritual, every hand that had brushed against its rocks. And here, the legends begin to thicken. Among local lore is the story that King Solomon, famed for his wisdom and his command over both men and spirits, once walked this valley. Some tales suggest that the jinn, summoned by the king, shaped colossal stones here, stones too massive to lift with human strength, yet placed with a precision that defies the logic of any age. Could these be the very foundations upon which later civilizations would attempt to build? Could the Trilithon, the stone of the pregnant woman, and those other monoliths abandoned in the quarry be the legacy of a knowledge we no longer possess? A blueprint left behind by hands that were not entirely human, or at least not constrained by what we consider possible. It is tempting to dismiss these myths as the fancy of later generations trying to rationalize the impossible. And yet, the very scale of the stones, the uncanny precision of their placement, the decisions to quarry blocks that would never be fully used, all of this invites questions that ordinary history cannot answer. Who truly measured the angles, who imagined the weight, and who set the first course for a site that would later become the pinnacle of Roman ambition? With the march of Alexander's armies in 334 BCE, the Bekaa Valley felt the first tremors of a new world order. The city, once a quiet place of local devotion, was renamed Heliopolis, the city of the sun. The Greeks brought with them not just conquest, but a worldview that intertwined power, astronomy, and religion in ways both familiar and alien to those who had come before. Rather than erase the past, the Hellenistic rulers adapted it. They built upon the foundations left by the Canaanites and Persians, honoring the sacred alignments and celestial patterns already etched into the land. Temples were repositioned, altars oriented, and rituals recast in the language of the Greek pantheon. Apollo, Dionysus, Athena. These gods were woven into the existing fabric of worship, layering new meaning upon the old. Alignments to solstices, lunar cycles, and star paths were preserved, suggesting that the ancients who came before had encoded knowledge not merely for ritual, but for reasons we still cannot fully grasp. Even the myths endured. Locals whispered that the same stones that baffled engineers in later centuries had already been present, silent witnesses to these transformations. Could it be that the Greeks, sophisticated as they were, saw only part of the truth? That these megaliths, some weighing nearly 1,000 tons, were already part of a plan older than human memory, a design they could admire but not comprehend? And so, as Heliopolis thrived under Hellenistic influence, the stage was set for the next great chapter, Rome. For when the emperors arrived, they would inherit not just a city but a mystery, one whose scale and precision would challenge even the might of their legions. Yet even as their colossal temples rose, even as columns stretched toward the heavens, the question remained, who or what had set the first stones, and why? Around 15 BCE, under the rule of Augustus, the city was absorbed into the empire, becoming a Roman colony. But unlike other colonies, Baalbek was not simply mapped, conquered, or rebuilt. It was transformed. The Romans, masters of engineering and spectacle, inherited a site whose scale and sacred resonance were already extraordinary. They began the construction of monumental temples, each more ambitious than the last. With relentless precision, Roman engineers built their grandest temples atop the older layers, as if acknowledging, or perhaps exploiting, the sanctity already rooted in the earth. But when they reached the original foundations, they did something unusual. They stopped. It was here that the Trilithon captured imaginations and confounded engineers for centuries. Romans did not reshape the base. They did not quarry new stones to match its scale. They simply built upon it, as if conceding that whatever force carved and placed those megaliths had achieved something beyond Roman capability. This is where archaeology becomes uncomfortable. Each civilization left its mark on Baalbek, yes, but none claimed the megaliths. None replicated their methods. None expanded on their blueprint. The stones seemed to belong to a world that existed before the familiar timeline of human development. a world whose fingerprints remain, even as its memory has been erased. The Romans, masters of technique, surely attempted to move these colossi. Yet the very fact that some remain abandoned hints at limitations, at mysteries that the empire could not fully conquer. The quarries themselves seem to mock modern assumptions, enormous blocks aligned with the landscape yet never used, as if some lost knowledge or ancient blueprint dictated which stones were placed and which were left behind. And so Baalbek under Rome became a paradox, monumental temples rising with all the artistry and ambition of an empire, yet resting upon foundations whose construction exceeds anything the records or imagination can fully explain. It is here that the story of human ingenuity meets the shadow of the inexplicable, where the question shifts from how did they build this to who or what first set the stage. Because for all the columns, carvings and grandeur, the real mystery of Baalbek lies not in what the Romans completed, but in the stones that came before them. The Trilithon and the quarry monoliths whisper across the millennia, hinting at knowledge lost, at methods forgotten, at hands that moved with certainty in ways we may never replicate. And as you stand before these foundations, you cannot help but ask, how could humans, bound by the physics of their age, ever achieve this? And if they did, why would some of these enormous stones remain unfinished, as if some invisible hand had halted their work? And as the layers of history accumulate, a strange truth emerges. The deeper you go into Baalbek's past, the more the explanations evaporate. Tools become simpler, engineering becomes cruder, societies become smaller, yet the stones become larger. History is supposed to move in the other direction. Perhaps that is why standing here feels like standing at the edge of something forbidden, a threshold between what we can explain and what we can only witness. Baalbek does not behave like a normal archaeological site. It behaves like a message left across ages, but from whom and for whom remains unanswered. Over the years, scientists studied these stones and tried to find possible answers to every question. Let's discuss their theories and science now. To confront the megaliths of Baalbek is to confront the laws of nature themselves. Step close to the Stone of the South, a limestone giant weighing roughly 1,200 tons. Imagine it not as stone, but as a force, a mass that resists every instinct, every lever, every hand. To move it even 1 inch, calculations whisper, would require the strength of 8,000 men, acting in perfect, unbroken unison, their combined muscles a human lattice of energy against gravity, friction, and inertia. Friction alone becomes a silent adversary. On a polished limestone bed, a sled might glide, but only if every surface is perfectly prepared, every contact minimized, every angle accounted for. One misstep, one slight imperfection, and the colossal weight resists motion as if the stone itself were alive. Inertia, that relentless memory of matter, refuses to bend to human will. 1,000 tons do not accelerate gently. They resist, they demand, they mock. And yet in the shadows of modern marvels, our disbelief only grows. NASA's crawler transporters, machines built to carry rockets weighing over 6,000 tons, rely on engineered tracks, precise leveling, and computer-controlled force. The Thunderstone of St. Petersburg, a 1,200-ton monolith moved in 1770, required a combination of lubrication, planning, and sheer ingenuity. But Baalbek's stones were neither placed on flat plains nor treated with modern engineering methods. They were carved, rolled, and elevated across uneven terrain, centuries before the wheel would see its greatest use in Europe. Even the mighty Liebherr LR 13,000, a modern crane capable of lifting 3,000 tons, would hesitate before the Trilithon. And yet, ancient builders managed it, or at least they left behind monuments that suggest they did. No written manuals survive, no diagrams, no evidence of levers or cranes capable of such a feat. Only the stones, fitted with precision so perfect that even today engineers struggle to replicate the joints. whisper of a knowledge lost to time. Consider the logistics. A single Trilithon block weighs 750 to 800 tons. To move it with rollers or sledges requires hundreds, perhaps thousands of hands, perfectly synchronized. To elevate it, to set it atop the podium of the Temple of Jupiter, with joints precise enough to resist earthquakes for 2 millennia, requires surveying and alignment skills that rival modern civil engineering. The Romans had ingenuity, certainly, but the scale here exceeds even their documented capabilities. Tool marks tell a partial story. Chisels and picks scar the surfaces, suggesting labor and method. But how does one scale the application of small iron tools to blocks heavier than any human could physically lift? Even if manpower were sufficient, how were the massive stones stabilized, guided, and positioned to millimeter perfection atop the podium? Each unanswered question magnifies the sense of impossibility. This is the stage where physics confronts ambition, where human determination strains against mass, gravity, and the unforgiving laws of mechanics. And yet, for all these trials, for all the calculations, for all the awe-inspiring thought experiments modern science can muster, a chilling realization emerges. This is only the problem of movement. Sliding, rolling, levering, a Herculean task, yes, but placement, alignment, precision. Indeed, placement is the miracle, because to move a stone is one thing. To set it atop a podium in exact alignment, earthquake-resistant, and perfectly joined to stones heavier than any living being can imagine. That, the Trilithon, the stone of the south, the abandoned quarry giants, and the entire podium of Baalbek demand us to consider. Did our ancestors possess knowledge we have since lost? Or were they aided by methods that modern physics cannot yet reconcile? And so we stand at the edge of understanding, staring into a question that refuses to yield. How could humans, bound by the limits of their own bodies, move these stones at all, and more impossibly, place them with such perfection? The numbers, the forces, the equations, they reach their limits here. The imagination strains, and yet the stones remain defiant, silent, immutable, waiting for us to see not just what was done, but the depth of knowledge that must have made it possible. And the real miracle, as we are about to discover, is not the act of moving, it is the placement. How were they positioned with a precision that defies everything we know about ancient technology? Let us return to the Trilithon, those 3 limestone giants weighing between 700 and 800 tons each. Picture them, perfectly aligned, elevated on a podium 7 to 10 meters high, their joints so tight that not even a sheet of paper slips between them. The Romans, brilliant architects and engineers in their own right, are credited with building the Temple of Jupiter atop this platform. But the foundations below, these massive stones, speak a different language. They whisper of skills, methods, and knowledge lost to time. Moving a block of this size requires overcoming 3 invisible adversaries: friction, inertia, and gravity. Friction alone presents a formidable challenge. A sled or roller, no matter how expertly constructed, must contend with the resistance of the stone against the ground. The coefficient of friction for limestone on limestone, slightly lubricated by water or oil, is low, but not low enough to make a 1,000-ton stone slide easily. Even if 100 men push, even if 1,000 synchronize their efforts, the block remains obstinate. Calculations suggest that to move a single Trilithon, one would need the force of 8,000 men acting in perfect unison, applying every ounce of strength at exactly the right moment. And yet movement is only part of the challenge. Inertia, the tendency of a mass to resist changes in motion, requires that once the stone begins to move, it must maintain momentum over uneven terrain. A single dip, a ridge or an irregularity in the ground could stop progress entirely, sending 1,000 tons of limestone to an unceremonious halt, or worse, tumbling catastrophically. Ancient builders would have needed perfectly prepared paths, engineered to distribute weight and absorb stress, yet archaeological surveys reveal nothing of the scale that such paths would demand. Were they temporary, Were they obliterated by time, or did they exist in a form we cannot yet imagine? Gravity, of course, is relentless. Rolling a stone along a flat surface is one challenge. Elevating it 7 meters into a podium is another entirely. Even modern cranes struggle with such tasks. The Liebherr LR 13000 can lift up to 3,000 tons, but it does so under conditions engineered for perfection: leveled ground, controlled lifts, and computer-assisted balancing. Ancient Romans lacked such technology. They had ropes, pulleys, inclined planes, levers, and ingenuity, but those alone, when applied to 750 to 800-ton blocks, enter the realm of near impossibility. Consider also the stone of the pregnant woman lying in the quarry, a limestone monolith weighing roughly 1,000 tons. Nearby lies the stone of the south, approximately 1,200 tons, and the 2014 discovery, an astonishing 1,650-ton block, carved but abandoned, lying silent as if mocking our assumptions. Why quarry such blocks with precision only to leave them untouched? Could it be that the builders knew their own limitations? Or is this evidence of an entirely different technique, one lost to history? Modern parallels offer perspective, if not reassurance. The Thunderstone in St. Petersburg, moved in 1770, weighed roughly 1,250 tons, comparable to Baalbek's largest blocks, but it rested on flat ground, aided by rollers and lubrication. Even then, its transport was a feat of centuries' worth of planning, manpower, and ingenuity. NASA's crawler transporters, designed for the Saturn V and space shuttles, carry 6,000-ton rockets, but over engineered tracks with exact leveling and careful stabilization. Attempt the same task over the uneven slopes of Baalbek, and the enormity of the challenge becomes undeniable. And yet, the Trilithon stands. The massive quarries lie just behind it. It seems impossible, absurd, almost as if the laws of physics bend at this site. Scholars have proposed ingenious solutions: earthen ramps, sledges lubricated with water or oil, coordinated manpower. Experiments moving 25-ton blocks at MIT demonstrate that scaled approaches can work in theory. But theory, no matter how elegant, begins to strain when applied to a single monolith that weighs 30 times that amount. Some researchers venture into more speculative terrain. Could acoustic resonance have played a role? The idea, though often dismissed, suggests that vibration, produced perhaps by instruments, chants, or tuned frequencies, could reduce the effective weight of stone, allowing it to slide or even float into place. Ancient cultures across the world, from Tibet to Mesoamerica, speak of sound as a force capable of shaping matter. Could the builders of Baalbek have understood principles we have yet to rediscover? Other theories involve complex counterweight systems, enormous inclined planes, and timber constructions of unimaginable scale. Such methods could, in principle, move massive stones. But here we confront the archaeological silence. No traces of such scaffolds or wooden frameworks remain. One can hypothesize, but evidence is stubbornly absent. Only the stones themselves speak, and they offer no instructions. And yet perhaps the most confounding mystery is precision. Moving stone is a Herculean feat, yes, but positioning it atop a raised podium, aligning 3 massive blocks with millimeter accuracy, creating a joint so tight it has survived earthquakes and millennia, is astronomical. Modern engineers marvel at this precision. Even with contemporary instruments, reproducing it would challenge the limits of design, computation, and manpower, and the Romans left no records describing techniques capable of such feats. It is here, at this intersection of ambition, scale, and knowledge, that Baalbek transcends engineering. The megaliths are no longer simply stones. They are proof that our ancestors either achieved the impossible through methods now lost, or were guided by principles or knowledge beyond our comprehension. The quarries, the abandoned giants, the perfectly placed Trilithon, each tells a story of labor, intent, and perhaps secrets too vast for our modern understanding. And as the sun sets over the Bekaa Valley, casting long shadows over the elevated podium and silent quarries, one cannot help but ask, did the Romans simply inherit a site already perfected, or did they possess knowledge that has since vanished? Were these stones moved by human hands alone, or were ancient technologies, forgotten, mystical or practical, at work here, leaving behind a legacy that continues to baffle engineers, archaeologists, and historians alike? Because at Baalbek the ordinary rules do not suffice. The monumental becomes miraculous, the plausible strains toward impossibility, and the very stones demand that we reconsider not just what humans were capable of, but what knowledge may have slipped through the cracks of time. And as you ponder these questions, the final thought lingers like a shadow in the quarry. This is only the problem of movement. Moving the stones may defy imagination, but the true wonder, the real miracle, is placement. Where and how these blocks were set with such perfection remains the deepest enigma. And it is here that we confront the next chapter of Baalbek's mystery. Not how the stones moved, but how they were aligned, elevated, and locked into a puzzle that challenges both logic and gravity. What if the methods themselves were never human at all? For centuries, scholars have wrestled with this puzzle, but even the most meticulous calculations cannot fully reconcile the size, weight, and precision of the megaliths with the known capabilities of Roman technology. And it is precisely this gap between possibility and reality that gave rise to alternative theories, some scientific, others speculative, and some that border on the mystical. The most conservative explanations credit the Romans. Yet, as we have seen, no documentation, tool marks, or construction debris fully accounts for stones like the 1,650-ton monolith discovered in 2014. When modern engineers attempt to replicate these feats, the numbers are staggering. To move a single trilithon of 750 tons, friction and terrain suggest the labor of 8,000 synchronized workers, each pushing in perfect unison. To elevate and precisely position it atop the Temple of Jupiter's podium demands engineering expertise that, by all surviving records, did not exist in antiquity. Even the Thunderstone, weighing 1,200 tons, required decades of planning and bronze ball rollers to move flat across St. Petersburg. And yet it never needed to be elevated into a multi-story podium with millimeter precision. This tension between what is physically achievable and what exists leads inevitably to speculation. Some researchers have suggested that Baalbek may preserve knowledge from civilizations older than recorded history, civilizations that may have had access to technologies or understanding lost to time. One line of thought argues that the quarries themselves, with partially finished monoliths like the stone of the pregnant woman and the abandoned 1,200-ton stone of the south, hint at experimentation beyond Roman ambition. The Romans may have inherited these blocks, repurposing them for the temples, but the scale and precision appear almost pre-Roman in conception. Among the more provocative theories is the notion of acoustic levitation. While it may sound fantastical, acoustic levitation is a real scientific principle. Using sound waves at precise frequencies, small objects can be suspended and even moved. Experiments in laboratories today have moved droplets of liquid, small metallic spheres, and other lightweight objects. Extrapolating this to massive stones may seem absurd, but what if ancient cultures discovered empirical methods ritualized in chants, instruments, or tuned resonances that amplified natural phenomena to aid in construction? Legends from Tibet, Peru, and Mesopotamia speak of stones that moved with the voice, of sacred vibrations that could lift or guide heavy materials. Could Baalbek be a forgotten epicenter of such knowledge, where sound, geometry, and ritual intersected to achieve the impossible? Other theories turn to the cosmic alignment of the temples. The Romans were meticulous builders, yet Baalbek's foundations appear not only structurally impossible, but cosmically informed. The orientation of the Temple of Jupiter, the placement of the Trilithon, and the alignment of the smaller temples suggest attention to celestial events, the rising of particular stars, solstices, and lunar cycles. Some researchers speculate that the builders were not merely Roman architects, but successors to a tradition where mathematics, astronomy, and sacred geometry dictated every monumental action. This aligns with the idea that the site may predate Rome, inherited from cultures that recorded knowledge in stone rather than on clay tablets. Even the myths surrounding Baalbek offer tantalizing clues. Local legend speaks of jinn shaping the stones for King Solomon, unseen hands moving impossibly heavy blocks to construct a temple worthy of divine observation. Other tales hint at giants, Nephilim, or ancient beings capable of feats beyond human strength. While these stories are often dismissed as folklore, they persist for a reason. They point to an intuitive recognition that something extraordinary occurred here, something beyond the grasp of ordinary human hands. The recurrence of these myths across centuries and cultures raises a question that modern science cannot yet answer. Why would stories of supernatural builders cluster around sites where physics itself seems to fail? Beyond myth, parallels across the globe demand attention. Consider Pumapunku in Bolivia, where stone blocks weighing up to 130 tons are precisely cut and aligned with a precision rivaling that of Baalbek. Or the ancient monoliths in Gornaya Shoria, Russia, where single stones exceed 1,500 tons, some partially carved and abandoned in quarries. Across continents and millennia, human societies appear to have repeatedly attempted the impossible, leaving behind silent monuments that defy conventional engineering explanations. Is this coincidence or evidence of a lost global knowledge? Modern constraints only deepen the enigma. NASA's crawler transporters can move 6,000-ton rockets, but only on leveled, reinforced tracks under controlled conditions. Even the Thunderstone required 400 workers, weeks of planning and lubrication with bronze balls on a flat surface. Baalbek's stones had to traverse uneven ground, navigate elevation changes, and be positioned with a precision that would daunt even the most sophisticated modern engineers. Roman cranes using wood and rope were limited to lifting around 100 tons at height, far short of the weights of these monoliths. Seismic activity, earthquakes, and centuries of regional conflict have further obscured the evidence, erasing clues that might have offered insight into the original techniques. This leads to a stark conclusion. The builders of Baalbek, whether Roman, inherited or unknown, operated at the very edge of physics or perhaps even beyond it. Every attempt to explain the site using conventional means meets a wall, one built of limestone, precision cut and aligned with such sophistication that skepticism alone cannot account for it. Even now, 2,000 years later, engineers, archaeologists and physicists continue to puzzle over the same questions. How were the stones quarried, moved and positioned? What tools, techniques or knowledge were applied? And why were some monoliths left unfinished, abandoned in the quarry, while others were elevated with such perfection? Yet it is precisely this tension between the plausible and the impossible that makes Baalbek more than an archaeological site. It is a monument to curiosity, a challenge to human understanding, and a silent testament to ambition that may stretch far beyond recorded history. The site reminds us that human history is not always linear, not always rational, and sometimes refuses to conform to the constraints of science, logic, or reason. And as we gaze across the elevated podium, the Trilithon, and the abandoned quarry giants, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The story of Baalbek is unfinished, written in stone and shadow, calling us to question what we know about the ancient world, and perhaps about ourselves. Because in the end, this is not just a question of engineering, physics, or mythology. It is a question of knowledge lost, of civilizations erased from memory, and of mysteries that continue to defy our most sophisticated methods of measurement. And while we can calculate, hypothesize, and speculate, the stones themselves hold the final verdict. Which brings us to the next question of our documentary. The movement of the stones was extraordinary, but it is only one part of the enigma. The real miracle, the true mystery, lies in their placement, their alignment, and their purpose. How does one account for construction so precise that it surpasses both human strength and modern machinery? And more importantly, what does that tell us about the minds that conceived Baalbek in the first place? As night falls over the Bekaa Valley, the stones cast long shadows across the plateau. The air hums with silence, and for a moment, you can almost hear the whispers of builders long gone, or perhaps of forces and knowledge we have yet to rediscover. And so, the question hangs in the darkness. If movement was miraculous, placement is something that borders on the divine. But what kind of intelligence, ancient or otherwise, could have orchestrated such a feat? After confronting the staggering scale of Baalbek's megaliths and entertaining the possibility of lost civilizations or otherworldly methods, the mind naturally seeks balance. If these stones defy the limits of human strength, there must be reason, evidence, and perhaps more mundane explanations hiding in plain sight. This is where the meticulous work of archaeology enters the frame, a discipline attempting to reconcile myth and mathematics, legend and logic. Archaeologists like Jean-Pierre Adam and Joseph Nasrallah insist that the Romans were not merely improvisers, they were methodical planners. By studying Roman construction elsewhere, from amphitheaters to aqueducts, scholars deduce that the empire had mastered logistics, labor organization, and geometry in ways that allowed for feats that still surprise us today. Adam, for instance, proposed that the Trilithon and podium were assembled using sledges on lubricated paths, counterweights, ramps, and a workforce organized in precise rotations. According to his calculations, 512 men could theoretically move a single 800-ton block over a short, inclined distance if coordinated perfectly. Modern experiments lend some credence. MIT engineers successfully transported a 25-ton block using wooden rollers and sledges, demonstrating that with careful planning, incremental scaling can achieve results previously thought impossible. Yet here, even the proponents of Roman ingenuity pause. Scaling methods for 25 tons to 800 or even 1,650 tons introduces exponential challenges. Friction, slope, soil consistency, and the dangers of seismic activity multiply the difficulty at each step. Any miscalculation could destroy the stone, the ramp, or the workers themselves. It is in these cracks, these gaps in the record, that the fringe theories creep forward, whispering that perhaps human effort alone cannot explain what we see. The quarries 800 meters south offer another puzzle. There, the stone of the pregnant woman, at around 1,000 tons, was abandoned mid-quarrying, and the even larger stone of the south, at 1,200 tons, sits unfinished. In 2014, German archaeologists unearthed a 1,650-ton monolith untouched by transport. Tool marks, chisels, pick scratches, grooves, indicate Roman methods, yet the stone's abandonment raises questions. Why start such colossal work without finishing it? Were they too difficult to move, deemed unnecessary, or evidence of a tradition predating Rome? The absence of clear explanation fuels speculation, but the stones themselves remain patient, silent witnesses. Skeptics also challenge the romanticized view of impossible construction. Romans, after all, had more manpower than most modern projects, including conscripted labor, slaves, and skilled artisans. They understood leverage, geometry, and basic physics intuitively, even if they lacked cranes capable of lifting hundreds of tons. Written sources, including Pliny the Elder, describe ambitious building campaigns with astonishing logistical precision. While these texts do not mention 800-ton stones directly, they offer context for a culture that routinely attempted the extraordinary. Moreover, stratigraphy and excavation reveal continuous Roman activity, reinforcing the idea that Baalbek's monumental phase belongs to an empire renowned for engineering. Temple blocks align with Roman surveying techniques, and inscriptions commemorate Roman governors and emperors. Even the Temple of Bacchus, with its 42 columns and intricate carvings, testifies to standardized construction knowledge applied with extraordinary scale. In other words, the very precision that seems anomalous also fits within a Roman worldview of order, hierarchy, and absolute control. Yet, counterpoints emerge that refuse to be ignored. For one, the sheer scale of the quarries exceeds Roman necessity. Why carve stones weighing more than 1,000 tons when the largest podium required only 800-ton blocks? Second, some features, microscopic fittings of the Trilithon, the earthquake-resistant integration of blocks without mortar, appear far more advanced than other Roman engineering. Here the debate sharpens. Is this a coincidence, a product of extreme ingenuity, or a hint of inherited knowledge? Additionally, Baalbek's pre-Roman layers complicate the picture. Pottery shards from the pre-pottery Neolithic B period, almost 9000 BCE, and Persian artifacts from the 6th to 4th centuries BCE hint at continuous ritual and habitation, even if no monumental structures survive. Myths such as djinn-shaping stones for Solomon, though dismissed by conventional scholars, persist across centuries. They are cultural fingerprints, reminders that human memory encodes awe and anomaly in story long before it is recorded in stone. From a modern perspective, the site poses a challenge to how we evaluate evidence. The absence of pre-Roman monumental construction is not proof of impossibility, but neither is it proof that the Romans alone solved an unprecedented engineering puzzle. Each layer, each tool mark, and each myth is a piece of a mosaic that refuses to fit neatly into conventional narratives. In this space between certainty and speculation, fascination thrives. Science, of course, has its own contributions. Geologists study limestone composition, quarry methods, and erosion patterns to estimate the effort required. Structural engineers simulate stress, weight distribution, and seismic resistance, confirming that even minor errors would collapse the structures. Archaeologists document Roman infrastructure, roads, ramps, and scaffolding that could partially explain movement, yet no complete solution emerges. Modern technology reproduces fragments of these processes, but full-scale replication remains beyond reach. It is here that viewers might ask themselves, if human ingenuity can stretch to these limits, where do we draw the line between possibility and miracle? And if we credit only the Romans, are we missing traces of older knowledge? The debate is not merely academic, it strikes at the heart of how we understand history, innovation, and the capabilities of our ancestors. In the end, Baalbek sits at the intersection of evidence and imagination. The podium and Trilithon, the quarries, the myths, and the archaeology collectively narrate a story that is both explicable and inexplicable, factual and fantastical. It is a story that refuses to yield to conventional reasoning, urging us to question the boundaries of human achievement. And yet, the real puzzle is not simply how the stones were moved, carved, or aligned. The true enigma waits beneath the surface, literally, figuratively, and historically. Beneath the Roman temples, beneath the Trilithon, lie foundations older than Rome, hints of civilizations that may have operated on principles we are only beginning to imagine. As we step back, we are left with a lingering question, echoing across millennia. If the evidence can support the Roman explanation, why does the scale, precision, and alignment of Baalbek continue to defy the limits of physics, engineering, and reason? And that perhaps is where our journey turns next, into the heart of the mystery, where science, myth, and human imagination converge, and where the stones themselves may still be guarding their secrets. Here, a question came to scientists' minds. What if the Romans did not build the foundation? What if they only inherited it and repurposed it? What if the quarries, the great monoliths, even the stones of the Trilithon existed long before Rome ever set foot here? Perhaps carved by hands we no longer remember. In every age, in every distant corner of the ancient world, we find echoes of this possibility. Across continents, across deserts and jungles, across mountains and valleys. Sites such as Göbekli Tepe in Anatolia, Pumapunku in Bolivia, and megalithic quarries in Gornaya Shoria in Russia all show that long before history began, humans, or something else, dared to shape stone on a massive scale. Some of these sites date to 9000 BCE or earlier, challenging the notion that large-scale architecture began with metal tools or urban civilization. Could it be that the astonishing scale beneath Baalbek was laid not by Romans, but by a far older tradition, one rooted in the deep human past, or perhaps in something even older? If we entertain the possibility seriously, several features of Baalbek take on new meaning. The presence of colossal monoliths carved and partly prepared, but never delivered, never placed, becomes less a failure of Roman logistics and more evidence of an abandoned ancient plan, perhaps interrupted by catastrophe, flood, climate shift, or social collapse. Suppose just for a moment that between 9000 and 5000 BCE, a culture existed in the Levant, modest in outward appearance, yet bold in its understanding of geometry, stone, astronomy, and mass. A people who aligned their structures to the heavens, who recognized the valley's alignment, its bedrock stability, its cosmic potential, and began carving stones in prehistory long before they ever built temples, cities, or empires. After millennia of erosion, war, repurposing, and memory loss, their works might lie half-hidden, buried beneath more recent layers. The Greeks, the Romans, and the Byzantines cleansed the names. The gods changed, yet the stones remained. In this light, the quarry's abandoned giants take on a chilling silence. Not failures, but relics of an attempt paused, perhaps forever. Blocks weigh more than any living being could lift, shaped with precision, aligned with some cosmic code, then left to rest in the earth. Parallel after parallel emerges across the globe. At Pumapunku, stone blocks of extraordinary precision sit in ruins, some carved and partially shaped, others lying as if dropped by beings accustomed to mass beyond normal human capacity. At Göbekli Tepe, monumental enclosures appear thousands of years before the advent of agriculture, challenging the simple narrative that farming led to civilization. At Gornaya Shoria, massive stones, some over 1,500 tons, remain abandoned in quarries, carved but unmoved. Are these disconnected anomalies, or remnants of a vanished global tradition? Why might such a tradition vanish? The answers lie partially in the shifting Earth. Climate events, rising and falling sea levels, abrupt changes in habitability could shatter even the mightiest of cultures. Think of flooding rivers, shifting shorelines, shifting mountain climates. Consider plagues, wars, invasions, the common scourges of human history. Some theorists point to the end of the last ice age, the period known as the Younger Dryas, roughly 12,000 years ago, as one of the most dramatic turning points in human prehistory. Imagine the planet suddenly cooling, glaciers creeping downward, seas shifting, deserts drying, rivers flooding. In a matter of decades, climates that had nurtured burgeoning human settlements could become hostile, inhospitable, unrecognizable. Crops that had fed communities for generations would fail. Freshwater sources might dry or shift. Wild game could vanish. Entire ecosystems collapsed. In such a world, fragile societies whose knowledge was carefully built over centuries could vanish almost overnight. The people themselves might survive, wandering, displaced, or scattered across distant valleys and mountains, but their villages, their shrines, and their records, written on perishable materials like wood, clay, reeds, or textiles, would be erased. Only what they carved into stone or left embedded in the landscape could endure the onslaught of time. And in this stark survival of material, only the largest, most deliberate human interventions could whisper across millennia. Now, imagine the Bekaa Valley caught in such a transformation. A society may have begun the monumental task of shaping enormous blocks of limestone, carving them with precision, arranging them according to cosmic principles we still do not understand. They worked with devotion, with knowledge lost to time, perhaps following a pattern inherited from ancestors before them, instructions from a forgotten epoch. Then disaster strikes. The climate shifts, a generation, a culture, a civilization, all thrown into chaos. The unfinished stones, the quarries, the partially carved monoliths, they remain monumental in their stillness, abandoned mid-creation. The project stops, not through failure, but through circumstance beyond human control. Centuries pass. Nature reclaims its boundaries. Sediment covers traces of scaffolding, timber supports rot, clay templates dissolve. Only the stones remain, silent, imposing, impossible. They are a memory encoded in rock, evidence of intent, precision and scale, but stripped of names, words or records. Then, long after the original builders have disappeared, new societies arrive, unaware, uninitiated, and perhaps intimidated by the scale of what they discover. They step upon foundations they did not create, gaze upon the half-carved monoliths, and feel compelled to repurpose, reshape, or worship. The Romans come, seeing the potential for grandeur and the opportunity to connect themselves to the past, overlaying temples atop stones they cannot fully comprehend. The Greek pantheon is woven into the existing sacred geometry. Canaanite myths are echoed, distorted, and reinterpreted. Every new generation baptizes these stones with new names, new gods, new rituals, layering culture upon culture, yet never fully uncovering the intentions of the first hands that hewed the rock. It is here, in this layering of history, disaster, survival, and reinterpretation, that the mystery of Baalbek becomes profound. The stones we see today are not merely Roman achievements. They are time capsules of lost knowledge, fragments of a world erased by catastrophe, yet stubbornly persisting through the most unforgiving of tests. Centuries of oblivion, earthquakes, human folly, and shifting empires. And it is not merely the abandonment that fascinates, it is the precision. How could successive societies, separated by centuries or millennia, recognize the value of these foundations? How could they adapt structures atop stones whose weight and dimensions defied comprehension? What secrets were encoded in the angles, the placements, the sheer immovability of the blocks? Could these foundations have been designed with a knowledge of physics or cosmology far beyond the grasp of the civilizations that later inhabited them? What of technology? The assumption that ancient societies used only simple tools, wood, rope, stone, muscle, may be a projection of modern ignorance. What if there were techniques, knowledge of leverage, sound, balance, native to those ancient builders, that we have lost? Perhaps they understood the rock on a molecular level, how limestone fractures under pressure, how vibration travels through mass, how sound waves might resonate in just the right pattern to reduce friction or shift weight. Today, we experiment with acoustic levitation to move small objects. Could scaled versions, harnessed by rituals and tuned instruments, have once lifted stones at Baalbek? The idea sounds like myth, but then so does the sight of the stones themselves. Or maybe they employed counterintuitive methods, floating stones on water channels carved deep into rock, using gravity and subtle buoyancy to shift weight, using seasonal floodwaters or carefully carved troughs, or perhaps harnessing natural fissures in the bedrock to pivot monoliths with minimal force, methods that would leave almost no trace after thousands of years. We must ask ourselves, when modern engineering fails, when physics yields only theoretical limits, are we looking at the limits of human possibility or the boundaries of human imagination? Legends endure for a reason. Around Baalbek, local folklore speaks not of Roman masons, but of jinn shaping stones for mighty kings, spirits of the earth and wind, unlimited by human frailty. Other traditions recall titanic beings, giants whose strength moved mountains, their names erased, but their footprints left in stone. Long before the Romans arrived to claim Baalbek as their colony, long before Augustus ordered the construction of the Temple of Jupiter, this land was already sacred. The Canaanites worshipped here around 2000 BCE, dedicating altars and temples to Baal, Astarte, and their son. It is not coincidence that sacred spaces are repeated across the ancient world. Elevated platforms, aligned stones, pathways tracing celestial events. The act of building was itself a ritual, a conversation with the cosmos. Here, myths are not embellishments. They are fragments of memory, like echoes reverberating across millennia. Legends of giants moving stones, of jinns summoned to labor for King Solomon, are not mere folklore. They are the ancestral attempts to explain feats so vast that ordinary human capacity seems inadequate. Consider the stories of Hajar al-Hibla, the stone of the pregnant woman, weighing more than 1,000 tons. For centuries, locals whispered that no human could have lifted it, that supernatural aid must have been involved. The myths persist because the scale, precision, and placement of the stones resist rational explanation. They are the cultural acknowledgement of a knowledge lost to time. The Greeks, who renamed the city Heliopolis, the city of the sun, recognized the continuing power of this site. They adapted the Canaanite sacred spaces, overlaying their own pantheon but retaining the alignment to the heavens. Temples and altars followed celestial patterns, solstices, equinoxes, and the apparent movement of the planets. Such precision implies knowledge of astronomy and a deliberate attempt to map human devotion onto cosmic rhythms. The city itself became a stage where the earth, sky, and human action intersected. And then the Romans arrived, their architects imposing columns and stonework that would endure for millennia. Yet even the Roman edifices, as monumental as they were, sat atop foundations whose origin and methodology they could neither replicate nor fully understand. Here lies the central paradox. The Roman structures are humanly explainable, yet the substratum, the Trilithon, the T-shaped base, the abandoned quarries, speaks to a mastery that seems older, stranger, and profoundly alien to the tools at their disposal. To grasp Baalbek's intent, we must consider cosmic alignment. Scholars have noted that the Temple of Jupiter podium, its axes, and the surrounding temples correspond to solar and lunar cycles, much as the Great Pyramid aligns to the cardinal points. Shadows cast at solstice and equinox suggest deliberate attention to the movement of the sun, while lunar and stellar markers may have guided ceremonial practices. Here, stone becomes calendar, temple becomes observatory, and myth becomes encoded instruction. Every placement is intentional. Every orientation matters. Consider the human scale against the divine. To the average Roman, an 800-ton stone was a challenge to be solved by manpower, levers, and ingenuity. To the original builders, whoever they may have been, the stone may have represented a narrative, a symbol, or a celestial anchor. It is possible that the scale of the megaliths was intended to inspire awe, to signal the presence of forces greater than humans, and to situate society within a cosmic order. The act of building, then, becomes not just engineering, but philosophy, theology, and psychology intertwined. Legends surrounding King Solomon offer an additional layer. According to Middle Eastern folklore, the jinn, supernatural beings of fire and wind, labored to erect massive stones for the Temple of Solomon. Some theorists draw parallels to Baalbek, suggesting that the site, with its impossibly heavy monoliths, could have inspired these stories. Could it be that stories of Solomon's mystical builders are cultural memories of encounters with megalithic foundations older than recorded history? If myths are memory encoded in narrative, then Baalbek's stones may have spoken to every succeeding civilization, whispering a language of awe and impossibility that humans could not yet decode. There is also a philosophical question here, subtle yet profound. What does it mean for a human society to build something whose creation surpasses its understanding? If Baalbek was indeed constructed upon pre-existing foundations, by hands we may never fully know, then it represents a dialogue across time. The Romans may have seen themselves as the masters of architecture, yet their monuments are mere caps on a legacy older than their records. This is the hero moment in our journey, where the observer realizes that civilization is not a line, a single narrative, but a palimpsest, layers of achievement, mystery, and lost knowledge stacked one upon another. To modern ears, these sound like fairy tales, superstition. But to pre-modern minds, when memory was oral, when myth was history, these stories were serious attempts to explain the unexplainable. When the rocks themselves defy mortal labor, only supernatural explanations remain plausible. If we remove the label myth, we are left with possibilities. Oral histories are fragile, but they reflect human attempts to archive wonder. When so many cultures across the world tell of giants, sky builders, star kings, and divine architects near their earliest monuments, what if these are not coincidences, but fragmented memories of a shared global tradition? Let me be clear, we do not assert that Baalbek was built by giants, by jinn, or by lost Ice Age civilizations. We do not claim proof. What we offer is a question, one so persistent, so rooted in the stones themselves, that it demands we consider it seriously. The myths also carry cautionary wisdom. Across cultures, tales of giants, supernatural builders, and cataclysmic events are often associated with warnings of hubris, of disobedience, of misalignment with the natural and cosmic order. Baalbek, with its perfect but abandoned stones, its unfinished quarries, and its impossible weight, may embody the consequences of knowledge partially known. The builders acted with intent, but the details of their mastery were never fully preserved, and so we, as observers, are left to fill the gaps, guided by evidence, logic, and imagination. Modern analysis offers tentative insights. High-resolution surveys, 3D laser scanning, and geological mapping reveal subtle features in the megaliths, grooves, wedges, and channels that may hint at ancient lifting techniques. Some researchers have proposed that water, friction reduction, and inclined planes were combined with precision surveying to position stones. Others note that the quarry marks sometimes suggest a different sequence of cutting than the Romans described. Still, no experiment fully accounts for the largest stones, leaving a tantalizing space for theory and speculation. What emerges from all this is an unsettling realization. Baalbek is more than a site. It is a nexus where human ambition, myth, and the cosmos intersect. Its megaliths speak to us not just of physical power, but of intention, of story, of the desire to leave an imprint on the world and the heavens simultaneously. Each stone is a sentence, each wall a paragraph, each temple a chapter in a narrative that spans millennia. And yet, the narrative is incomplete, leaving us, the observers, the explorers, the seekers, to imagine the missing pieces. What if Baalbek is not Roman, but recycled? What if Rome simply inherited a platform laid by civilizations we no longer remember? Civilizations that understood stone, sky, mass, and geometry in ways we can only glimpse through whispers in legend and the stubborn silence of rock. If so, then its true builders existed long before history began. If you're still with us, if these shadows of possibility stir something in you, now is an excellent moment to subscribe. Because as we peel away empire after empire, layer after layer, we edge closer not to certainty but to understanding. Yet even the boldest theories cannot account for everything. None can fully explain how stones weighing more than any living creature could move were shaped with precision, then elevated, aligned, and locked into place. They cannot explain the human will, the ritual fervor, the mathematical foresight. Consider the human element. Generations of laborers, planners, architects, all working with intent, only for their names, their accomplishments, their very existence to vanish. What did they know? What visions guided their chisels? What understanding of the heavens or the earth allowed them to align, lift, and position stones of such unimaginable mass? Every quarry's mark, every bevel, every scratch is a testament to skill, a whisper of thought processes that time cannot fully capture. And yet we are left with fragments. Persian ceramics from the 6th to 4th centuries BCE suggest that the site remained revered long before Roman colonization. Even without pre-Roman monumental structures, it is clear that successive cultures sensed the valley's power, that they recognized Baalbek as sacred, as worthy of reverence, and perhaps as a place where the material and the cosmic intersected. Could these artifacts represent the ongoing engagement with an already ancient mystery, human hands attempting to touch what had been shaped before memory began? As we contemplate these possibilities, the narrative threads start to intertwine. Cataclysm, myth, memory, precision, and ambition converge. The story of Baalbek begins to look less like a historical record and more like a layered palimpsest, a place where human civilization, disaster, and perhaps even the unknowable intersect. And now, the retention spike emerges, a question designed to chill and captivate. What if Baalbek is not Roman, but recycled? What if the structures we marvel at were not conceived in the 1st century BCE or CE, but were repurposed, reinterpreted, and realigned by successive cultures, attempting to impose meaning on something whose origin they could no longer comprehend? If so, then the real architects walked a world long before history began. Here, the forbidden civilizations concept gains traction. Perhaps societies existed, advanced in their understanding of stone, physics, and cosmic alignment, who perished in the great cataclysms of prehistory. Perhaps their knowledge survived only in the stones themselves, waiting for humans to rediscover, adapt, or misinterpret it. As you watch, consider this: every unfinished block, every perfectly cut edge, every misaligned column is more than architecture. It is evidence of thought, design, and intent, older than Rome, older than Greece, older than even written history. It is a challenge to our assumptions about human capability and the resilience of knowledge. And yet even these provocative ideas cannot prepare us for what comes next, because understanding the builders, lost or otherwise, is only part of the enigma. The greatest mysteries of Baalbek, its construction techniques, its astonishing alignment, its sheer scale, remain unresolved. The stones do not merely defy the Romans, they defy physics, logic, and the very conventions of history. Now, let us consider alignment. The ancient world was obsessed with the heavens, and Baalbek is no exception. Scholars have noted that the complex aligns with celestial events, perhaps marking solstices or the rising of specific stars. The Temple of Jupiter itself is oriented with remarkable precision along a north-south axis, a design choice that suggests astronomical intent. But the question lingers: how did the builders measure and execute this precision? Theodolites, laser levels, and modern surveying instruments were unknown. The Romans had rudimentary sighting tools, groma rods, and plumb lines. Yet the resulting work mirrors what would take modern engineers months, even years, of meticulous measurement and adjustment. And there is the geometry of the stones themselves. The monoliths of Baalbek are not simple rectangles. Their faces are beveled, their bases carved to match the topography of the terrain, and their surfaces finished to an accuracy that resists explanation. The larger the block, the more complex the challenge. Every fraction of a millimeter in angle or alignment affects stability. Ancient builders would have needed to understand not just weight and balance, but leverage, friction, and the distribution of stress across the stone's surface, knowledge that we often assume is the product of modern engineering physics. Some researchers suggest that the Romans simply inherited a foundation laid by earlier unknown civilizations. If that is the case, then the placement of these stones becomes even more enigmatic. How did a society possibly thousands of years before the Common Era understand forces, geometry, and alignment to a degree we struggle to replicate today? If myths are any guide, their knowledge may have been encoded in ritual, oral tradition, or secret guilds, hidden, esoteric, and ultimately lost to time. Consider the implications for modern science. The lifting, moving, and precise positioning of the 800-ton Trilithon alone is beyond anything the Romans could achieve with documented technology. The abandoned monoliths suggest that even for a civilization with the ability to quarry them, some stones were too vast to complete or transport, leaving us with the unnerving possibility that there were techniques, perhaps forgotten, that we no longer understand. Even today, we see evidence of careful adaptation to environmental forces. The Trilithon's placement atop the podium may have been intentional to mitigate seismic risk, its weight distributed to absorb tremors. But the sheer magnitude of trial and error required for such engineering defies conventional historical timelines. And yet, Baalbek remains standing. Earthquakes have come and gone, empires have risen and fallen, and the stones endure as if the builders knew, in ways we cannot fully comprehend, that permanence was possible. One cannot escape the human element. To coordinate labor for stones of this magnitude would require not just manpower, but knowledge, leadership, and vision. Estimates suggest that hundreds, if not thousands of workers would have been needed for each block, acting with near-perfect synchronization. Where did such organizational skill come from? And how was knowledge transmitted across generations, especially if the foundation predates the Roman Empire by centuries or millennia? Microhooks emerge throughout this contemplation. Every unfinished quarry block is a question. Every bevel, every join, every alignment is a challenge. How did they achieve it? Could there have been lost technologies, machines, techniques, or methods that vanished with their creators? Or did human ingenuity simply exceed our current assumptions, leaving behind a record so awe-inspiring it almost feels supernatural? Here, the philosophical weight presses in. If humans centuries or millennia ago could conceive, quarry, move, and place stones of such mass with such precision, what does that say about the trajectory of knowledge and how much of it we assume is modern? And what if our conventional timelines of technological progress are incomplete, shaded by what has survived in the written record? Yet Baalbek is not unique in this regard. Across the globe, ancient builders echoed this understanding. The Great Pyramid of Giza aligns to the cardinal points with extraordinary precision. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, stones interlock with millimeter accuracy, their orientation suggestive of astronomical awareness. Even in Gornaya Shoria, Russia, megalithic blocks appear to follow lines of celestial significance. Could these sites, separated by oceans and millennia, reflect a shared understanding, or perhaps a legacy of a forgotten civilization that encoded knowledge in stone and sky alike? This line of inquiry leads us to an unsettling notion. Perhaps Baalbek was never intended to be merely a temple or a monument. Perhaps it was designed as a bridge between human perception and cosmic order. The act of placing a stone of 800 tons, perfectly aligned with the heavens, becomes not just an engineering triumph, but a philosophical statement. It asserts that the physical world and the divine cosmos are intertwined, that human effort is a reflection of celestial intention, and that understanding one requires understanding the other. And yet, if this is true, the knowledge behind these alignments was not preserved in texts or manuals. Roman engineers, sophisticated as they were, left no treatises explaining how to manipulate stones of such scale while maintaining precise orientation. The Greek adaptations, while elegant, do not account for the underlying precision embedded in the foundations. We are left to speculate, to reverse engineer intent from consequence. In doing so, we confront a paradox. The evidence suggests a civilization that could manipulate matter and understand the heavens in ways that seem almost preternatural, yet they left behind no written record of these abilities. Perhaps the myths are attempts to explain what was once understood but became inexplicable across centuries. In this light, Baalbek is a story told in stone, a narrative we are still learning to read. Modern astronomy adds further intrigue. Observations suggest that certain temples within the complex align not only with solstices but with lunar standstills, rare extreme positions of the moon that occur every 18.6 years. Such alignments imply a long-term observational program, requiring generations of careful tracking. Did the original builders of Baalbek possess the ability to calculate lunar cycles centuries in advance? Did they encode this knowledge physically, ensuring it survived long after their civilization vanished? Our modern era does not stand still. New research, new finds, new threats swirl around the ancient plateau like desert wind stirring dust across a forgotten battlefield. To understand Baalbek today is to walk a tightrope between awe, science, and uncertainty. A revelation shook the archaeological world in recent years. A team from the German Archaeological Institute, DAI, working in Baalbek's ancient quarry, confirmed that the largest known monolith ever carved in antiquity lies half buried there. This block, estimated at 1,650 tons, far heavier than any stone ever successfully transported in antiquity, dwarfs even the legendary Stone of the Pregnant Woman. Dimensions and weight alone defy expectations, roughly 19.6 meters long, 6 meters wide, and 5.5 meters thick. Judicial measurement, precise analysis, the data is clear. Yet, this stone was never moved, never placed, never part of the polished podium or the elevated foundations of the great temples. The quarry marks and tool scars show intent. The rock was shaped, but then abandoned. This discovery reopened a question that seemed settled for centuries. Perhaps the quarries at Baalbek were not simply a source of raw material for Roman building projects. Maybe they were a workshop of experimentation, a laboratory of ambition so vast we struggle to comprehend its scale. A place where blocks were carved to test weight limits, to gauge their integrity, to measure the stone's soul. And some stones, judged unworthy or too risky, were left as they were. In modern times, scientists and engineers have tried to replicate aspects of ancient megalith movement, small-scale, carefully controlled in experimental settings. These trials, however, seldom approach the weight or complexity of Baalbek's giants. The largest successes involve a few tens of tons at best. Beyond that, friction, ground stability, and mechanical stress become insurmountable barriers. Which brings us to a more daring line of inquiry, one hovering at the edge of science and speculation. Could novel physical principles, perhaps lost or unrecorded, have played a role? Contemporary physics has begun to explore concepts that, a century ago, would have been dismissed as fantasy. For example, research into acoustic levitation, while only demonstrated with small objects in lab conditions, shows that sound waves can exert real, measurable force, even enough to levitate light bodies under very controlled circumstances. Could ancient engineers, in a world attuned to ritual, celestial cycles, and sacred geometry, have discovered ways to channel vibration, resonance, or energy through stone and air? Might they have combined geometry, rhythm, and material science in ways we have forgotten? The idea remains speculative, but Baalbek forces us to ask it. When the physical burden becomes too great for muscle and wood, could rhythm, sound, or resonance have provided the leverage we fail to imagine? In parallel, modern conservationists and heritage authorities face a darker reality. Baalbek is under threat. In 2024 to 2025, regional conflict cast a shadow over the site. According to reports by relevant heritage bodies, Baalbek sustained indirect damage, not from direct hits, but from proximity to airstrikes, shock waves, and debris from nearby bombardments. In November 2024, the site was granted provisional enhanced protection under the 1999 Second Protocol to the Hague Convention, a recognition of its fragility amid conflict. Conservation efforts, already limited by decades of underfunding and political instability, now confront fresh urgency. Plans for rehabilitation, maintenance, and protective zoning around the temples and quarries are underway, yet resources remain scarce. What does this dual reality mean for Baalbek's mysteries? On one hand, new finds like the 1,650-ton monolith suggest that the scale of ambition there was vaster than previously imagined. On the other, structural threats from conflict, neglect, and environmental pressures risk erasing clues forever. The stones do not speak in voices. Their secrets lie in cracks, in millimeters of displacement, in alignment with the stars, and as heritage professionals warn, even blast shockwaves, smoke, and vibration can disrupt foundations buried for millennia. Some modern researchers have suggested that advanced non-invasive scanning techniques could offer new windows into Baalbek's hidden past. For instance, techniques like muon tomography, used recently to examine buried cisterns and voids in other ancient sites, present a possibility to peer beneath the surface without invasive digging, to detect subsurface anomalies, hidden chambers, or structural irregularities. A 2025 study applied this cosmic ray muon imaging at a major archaeological site and demonstrated promising ability to map density distribution far below ground. If such methods were applied to Baalbek, perhaps beneath the elevated podium or beneath the quarries, we might discover voids, ancient ramps, structural supports, or anomalies that explain how stones were moved or placed, or alternatively, confirm that no conventional human-built support remains. Either result would be monumental, but there is a chilling catch. Many of these scientific tools require stability, security, and long-term commitment. In a region rattled by conflict and with heritage funding reduced to near zero since 2019, the window may be closing. As of the latest reports, restoration projects have stalled and maintenance is limited to clearing overgrowth and preventing vegetation damage. So Baalbek stands at a crossroads. On one path lies restoration, understanding, new research, and perhaps the unveiling of secrets that have eluded humanity for centuries. On the other lies neglect, deterioration, and the possibility that war, time, and indifference may erase what cannot be rebuilt. And yet, even today, the stones whisper. The quarry giants wait, half buried. The podium stands, defiant, and the valley holds its breath. As you consider this, if you are fascinated by the possibility that history is not yet fixed, that what we know may be only a fraction of what once was, this is the moment to wonder. Are we witnessing the final opportunity to unlock Baalbek's secrets? Or will these monoliths remain silent forever, their true origin lost to the dust of time? In 2025, the veil of uncertainty thinned just enough to reveal something astonishing. Across Lebanon, other megalithic traditions are beginning to emerge from the shadows. The Meg-A project, studying monuments in Akkar, has revealed stonework predating the Romans by millennia. Structures that suggest highly skilled quarrying and construction techniques existed in the Levant far earlier than previously thought. Could these ancient craftsmen have been part of a continuing tradition, their knowledge passed down, layer upon layer, until Roman engineers inherited it without fully understanding its origins? As we speak, modern science races to catch up. Remote sensing, laser scanning, AI-assisted modeling, tools that could once only be imagined, are being trained on sites like Baalbek, capable of revealing hidden voids, subterranean chambers, and perhaps the layout of foundations that predate the Romans entirely. Researchers dream of muon tomography, a technique already used elsewhere in the Middle East, to peer through stone without moving a single block. Yet politics and nature conspire against discovery. UNESCO's 2024 to 2025 reports warn that Baalbek's monuments, already weakened by centuries of earthquakes, wars, and neglect, teeter under modern instability. Every season of unrest risks erasing centuries of clues. Archaeologists cannot dig freely. Preservation becomes a race against time. And so the stones remain silent, their secrets trapped within, mocking our tools and theories alike. And yet, despite these obstacles, the revelations of recent years have begun to reshape our understanding. The new 1,650-ton monolith forces a question that no Roman ramp, no ingenuity with rollers, no combination of manpower can answer fully. Were these stones meant to be moved by human hands at all? Or were they left deliberately, a message from a civilization older than history itself, meant to challenge every assumption we hold about the limits of human capability? The mega project adds another layer of intrigue. Pottery fragments, remnants of ancient rituals, and carefully carved stones suggest that long before Roman columns rose, Baalbek was part of a long lineage of megalithic mastery. Some stones may have been quarried in one age, abandoned for centuries, only to be reused later. Could it be that the Romans were not the builders, but merely recyclers of something far older, attempting to impose their own order on foundations they could barely comprehend? The whispers of an older world grow louder when we consider physics. Even with today's most advanced cranes, machines capable of lifting 3,000 tons on level ground, moving a single Baalbek monolith remains an engineering nightmare. NASA's crawler transporters can haul 6,000 tons, yes, but only along carefully engineered tracks on flat, stable surfaces. The terrain of the Bekaa Valley is uneven, sloped, and unstable. For the ancients, the challenge was exponentially harder. Every stone would have required not just labor, but an intelligence of planning and precision that defies the technological record. And yet, some stones, like the Trilithon, were moved. They were elevated, fitted with joints so tight that not even a sheet of paper can fit between them. The question haunts every engineer, every archaeologist, every visitor who stands in the shadow of these monoliths. How did they do it? Some scholars caution against mystical thinking. They note that the Romans had ropes, ramps, sledges, and ingenuity. They suggest incremental lifting, clever leverage, and large teams. But even the most generous estimates strain credibility when applied to the largest stones. The 1,650-ton block, still unmovable today, forces a humbling acknowledgement. There are limits to what we can explain. Yet curiosity persists. Videos uploaded to YouTube in 2025, amassing millions of views, probe the "no human could build this" hypothesis. Discussions debate pre-flood civilizations, Roman quarry marks, and ancient lost technologies. Scientists caution viewers. Many of these claims are speculative, but the conversations, the debates, and the models keep the mystery alive. This is what makes Baalbek more than a ruin. It is a mirror held up to human ambition and limitation, a challenge written in stone. Every discovery raises new questions, each more unsettling than the last. The stones are both testimony and provocation, a challenge to our understanding of physics, engineering, history, and even human imagination. So, what do modern scientists hope to achieve? Step by step, through non-invasive imaging, digital modeling, petrological analysis, and interdisciplinary collaboration, they are piecing together the story of Baalbek. But every method has its limits. Political instability restricts excavation, seismic activity threatens the site, and centuries of human activity have scattered clues. The stones themselves refuse to speak freely. Political instability, ongoing regional conflicts, and simple human neglect threaten to erase the traces of ingenuity that survive above and below ground. In 2024, reports noted strikes and unrest in the Bekaa Valley that slowed, and in some cases halted, research. Scholars warn that without protection and funding, the loss may be irreversible, not just the temples that rise in shattered splendor, but the quarries, the unfinished stones, the subtle stratigraphic layers, the microscopic traces of chisels and tool marks, all the whispers of human hands that worked these impossibly heavy monoliths. Every year that passes without careful study risks burying knowledge older than any written history, hidden in plain sight beneath layers of dust, earth, and neglect. Yet, even in this precarious balance, modern science reaches toward answers, bending technology to the stone's stubborn silence. Remote sensing techniques, satellite imagery, and non-invasive imaging methods, including muon tomography, now allow researchers to peer through the immense limestone without moving a single block. These tools, once the province of particle physics and space exploration, are revealing hidden voids, structural anomalies, and subsurface patterns that hint at construction practices lost to memory. In Jerusalem and other ancient Middle Eastern sites, 2025 muon imaging campaigns have already illuminated hidden chambers beneath centuries of stone, demonstrating that secrets long thought inaccessible may yet be revealed. Could Baalbek too hold chambers, corridors, or foundations that explain its impossible architecture, lying just beneath our feet, waiting for technology to expose them? Meanwhile, mainstream scholarship proceeds with caution. Despite the wonder inspired by the scale and precision of Baalbek, most researchers resist the allure of lost civilizations or supernatural explanations. Articles from the MEG-A project, published in academic journals such as Springer Link and Bioscience, emphasize reconstructing the chaînes opératoires, the sequences of operations that may have guided quarrying, moving, and placement of these monoliths. Scholars focus on sourcing materials, understanding the steps required to cut and shape limestone, and theorizing how ancient engineering knowledge may have evolved in ways we can trace. In this framework, Baalbek is not a product of extraterrestrial intervention or unknown magic. It is a testament to human ambition and skill, albeit one that far exceeds what conventional archaeology had assumed possible. Even so, the tension remains. Every new technological advance brings fresh questions. When non-invasive imaging reveals an anomaly, the first thought is not always how, but who and when. Were these foundations truly Roman, or were they recycled from an older, forgotten civilization? Were the colossal quarries a product of a single empire's ambition, or remnants of knowledge passed down through millennia, waiting for humans to inherit, misunderstand, and attempt to reuse it? In other words, Baalbek teases us with a dual challenge. First, there is the mathematical impossibility, the raw physics of moving 1,000-ton stones. And second, there is the archaeological enigma, the question of human continuity, lost traditions, and the gaps in our understanding of history itself. Technology can illuminate patterns, reveal buried anomalies, and simulate engineering possibilities, but it cannot yet breathe life into the hands that shaped these stones. The stones remain silent teachers, their lessons embedded in granite and limestone, refusing to yield more than tantalizing glimpses. What is certain is that our approach to Baalbek must evolve. Conservation, careful observation, and non-invasive investigation have become the only way forward. Every year of conflict or neglect risks erasing data that might never be recovered. And yet, within this fragility lies hope. AI-assisted archaeology can detect minute differences in surface wear. Advanced dating methods can refine timelines. Satellite imaging can reveal hidden terraces and quarry paths invisible from the ground. The past is whispering, and for the first time, modern science is learning to listen. And yet, the more we uncover, the more the ancient whispers grow. Could it be that the Romans inherited more than a site, that they inherited a blueprint, a legacy of engineering and sacred alignment crafted by a civilization older than any records? Could Baalbek be a palimpsest of history where every era added its own layer, but none created the foundations? The modern world stands in awe, armed with physics, computers, cranes, and satellites, and still, the stones of Baalbek refuse to yield their full secrets. Even AI failed to understand them. Beyond the surface, AI works in tandem with satellite imagery and other remote sensing methods. High-resolution multispectral imaging can detect differences in mineral composition, revealing areas where ancient builders may have reinforced or altered the bedrock. Machine learning algorithms process decades of aerial photographs, LiDAR scans, and historical maps to reconstruct the quarrying landscape of Baalbek over millennia. Our eye can even identify anomalies beneath the soil, voids, unfinished cuts, or patterns suggesting that stones were partially prepared and then abandoned, without disturbing a single block. The implications are staggering. For the first time, science can approach the question not merely as, how were these stones moved, but as, what story do the stones themselves want to tell? Patterns emerged that were invisible to the naked eye, faint grooves suggesting repeated sliding motions, subtle depressions indicating temporary ramps, and alignments hinting at knowledge of geometry far ahead of its assumed time. AI does not speculate, it detects. And what it detects is often stranger than we imagine. Even advanced methods like muon tomography, which uses cosmic particles to peer through solid stone, are enhanced by AI. The torrents of data produced by particle detectors are overwhelming for conventional analysis. But algorithms trained to recognize structural anomalies can highlight voids, internal fractures, or unexpected cavities beneath the surface. These are the silent chambers that may hold keys to understanding not just how the stones were shaped and moved, but why certain blocks were abandoned, why others were elevated with impossible precision. AI also enables predictive modeling. By analyzing the forces required to move massive blocks, the software can simulate thousands of scenarios in virtual space. What would happen if a 1,200-ton block were levered, rolled, or floated? How friction, incline, and manpower would interact, where a miscalculation could collapse an entire podium. These models do not only replicate Roman engineering, they suggest limitations and possibilities that Roman methods alone cannot explain, hinting at either forgotten techniques or radical innovation lost to time. And yet, AI is not magic. It is a lens, a magnifying glass, a translator of patterns hidden in stone. It cannot tell us the names of the builders, the chants they may have intoned, or the celestial mandates that guided their hands. It cannot on its own bridge the gap between physics and mythology, or between the unfinished quarries and the perfectly aligned podium of the Temple of Jupiter. But it does offer a rare glimpse into a world that defies ordinary comprehension, where human ambition brushes against the limits of possibility, and where the stones themselves carry the faint echoes of knowledge long thought lost. Some of the most promising work comes from collaborative teams of archaeologists, computer scientists, and physicists. In 2025, projects modeled after successful muon imaging campaigns in Jerusalem applied AI algorithms to interpret subtle differences in the density of Baalbek's massive blocks. Early findings suggest irregularities beneath the podium, faintly hinting that some stones were reshaped or repurposed from an earlier era. A tantalizing possibility that aligns with theories of pre-Roman construction. AI does not claim to solve the mystery, it illuminates it, generating questions as much as answers, and revealing anomalies that might otherwise go unnoticed for centuries. In a place where human imagination strains against scale, AI becomes an interpreter of the impossible. It reminds us that even when human hands cannot move mountains, human ingenuity can nevertheless read the story etched into stone by hands long gone. And as algorithms analyze, compare, and simulate, we begin to realize something chilling. The mystery of Baalbek may not lie only in how the stones were moved, but in the knowledge they encode, a knowledge that even modern science is only beginning to uncover. Because even with AI's unprecedented capabilities, the most confounding question remains unanswered. Who first envisioned these stones, and for what purpose? And as we peer into the quarries, into foundations, and into the algorithm's virtual reconstructions, we realize that understanding Baalbek may require not only science, but imagination on a scale as vast as the stones themselves. Yet even as we entertain these possibilities, modern science continues to probe, to measure, to analyze. AI-assisted archaeology reads the stones like a manuscript written in limestone. Muon tomography peers through their mass, revealing voids and subtle irregularities. Remote sensing, satellite imaging, and computational modeling reconstruct movements and placements that human memory alone could never retain. Each technique illuminates fragments of a story, yet none fully explains the intention behind it, the method, or the mind that conceived it. What becomes clear is that knowledge may be embedded in the stones themselves, encoded not in words but in weight, alignment, and geometry. Baalbek challenges more than the limits of ancient engineering. It challenges the limits of imagination, of historical narrative, and of human understanding. We are forced to confront our assumptions that societies rise, reach their technological peak, and leave traces easily interpretable by modern eyes. Baalbek refuses to fit this comfortable story. It resists simple classification. It is Roman, yet simultaneously pre-Roman, monumental yet unfinished, natural yet defiant of natural explanation. Its stones speak in a language older than empires, and we are only beginning to learn its alphabet. The site also holds a mirror to humanity itself. We marvel at Baalbek not merely because of the stones, but because we recognize in them the relentless drive to build, to reach, to claim dominion over matter and meaning. Every civilization that touched this place, Canaanite, Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, left a mark, yet none could fully rewrite what had been begun. The builders, whoever they were, understood something fundamental, that permanence requires both ambition and humility. The stones endure, the builders are gone. And here is where the philosophical weight of Baalbek descends upon us. The megaliths force a reckoning with time itself. Civilizations are ephemeral, history is rewritten, languages vanish. But certain truths remain. Not truths in the literal sense perhaps, but truths in the experiential sense. That ambition can defy gravity, that knowledge can outlast memory, that the imprint of human or quasi-human intelligence can echo across millennia. Standing before these blocks, we sense the bridge between our own fleeting existence and a continuum of creation whose full scope we cannot yet grasp. Baalbek also serves as a caution. The modern world, with its tools, AI, satellites, and scientific rigor, is not immune to the gaps in understanding. Even with every advantage, we confront mysteries that defy linear reasoning. And as political instability and conflict threaten the site, as regional tensions and neglect imperil the quarries and podiums, we face the very real possibility that future generations may only know Baalbek through photographs and digital reconstructions, never through the tactile awe of walking among stones that have weighed the earth for thousands of years. Preservation is not merely an act of heritage, it is a struggle to maintain a connection to the sublime, to the impossible, to the questions that define human curiosity itself. So, what does Baalbek demand of us, in the end? It demands that we ask the hard questions, that we embrace the tension between explanation and wonder, that we accept the limits of our knowledge while still striving to expand them. It demands that we look beyond conventional narratives, beyond comfortable assumptions, to entertain that perhaps human history is not as linear or as complete as we have been led to believe. And it demands humility. Humility before the ingenuity of those who came before, humility before the weight of stone, and humility before the mysteries that will likely endure long after we, too, have vanished. As night falls over the Bekaa Valley, the megaliths fade into shadow. Their surfaces reflect starlight, echoing the celestial patterns that may have guided their placement, whispering the secrets of alignment, of purpose, of an ambition that stretches beyond comprehension. And yet, in the darkness, they are also silent companions to the human mind, inviting inquiry, provoking wonder, daring us to imagine possibilities greater than ourselves. In the end, Baalbek is more than a site, more than a set of ruins, more than a puzzle. It is a testament to the intersection of human imagination, ambition, and the unfathomable. It is a monument not merely of stone, but of the questions that define us. And perhaps that is its greatest lesson, that some mysteries are meant not to be solved, but to be felt, to inspire, and to challenge the boundaries of understanding across time. The stones remain. They have endured millennia of storms, empires, and earthquakes. They will endure millennia more. And in their enduring presence, they whisper to every generation that dares to wonder. There is more to human history than we know. There is more to human potential than we imagine. And some questions, those about purpose, mastery, and the extraordinary, may never be answered, yet they demand our attention nonetheless. And so, as we turn away from Baalbek, leaving its shadows to lengthen across the valley, one cannot help but feel that we have glimpsed not just the past, but the edges of possibility itself. And in that silence, the stones speak to us still, inviting us into the infinite dialogue between human curiosity and the mysteries of the universe. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe here on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.